Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
Well, it's so good to be here with you again. You know, we always bring in elected officials from around the Capital District, and today we have the minority leader, the Democratic leader of the Rensselaer County Legislature, Peter Grimm. So welcome. And I'm so happy that you were able to make it and come to be on our show.
Peter, Mark just said you're the minority leader, and we've had, like he says, we have a lot of political leaders and from Rensselaer County. Tell us the makeup of Republicans and Democrats. It's pretty much even. I mean, if you go to Albany, like then we have it's like 100 to nothing, 100%. But tell us more of the makeup of the political view of the Rensselaer.
Well, the counties, the legislature consists of 19 members, and that comes from 6 different districts throughout the county. Troy, the district which I represent, has the largest number of representatives, and it all goes on population. And I am one of the 6 legislators from the city of Troy. Now, the breakdown is there are 13 Republicans, and there are 6 Democrats on the legislature. The 6 Democrats are all from the city of Troy, and then the 13 remaining Republicans are all from the hill towns. So this is, in my first term, it wasn't that. We had Democrat representatives from the East Greenbush area.
My friend Brian Zweig was
Correct.
one of them, yes.
Was one of them. I served with Brian, pleasure. And but the second term, we lost those seats in East Greenbush, and we gained 2 in the city of Troy. So we took over the entire.
Like I say, it's a real seesaw in Rensselaer County. You don't see that, for example, in Albany County.
Well, no, it isn't.
Yeah.
For interesting part is like Albany County, the city of Albany. Well, Albany County is very Democrat in sense, but
In every sense of the word.
yes. Yeah. But the city of Troy, when I first ran for the legislature.
How long ago you're saying about?
In 2005, I ran for
All
the
right.
first time. And when I first ran, I was the lone Democrat from the city. The city, and I knocked out a Republican incumbent. So the city was, at that time, 6 Republicans. So it flip-flops.
Yes, I say it really is a seesaw there compared to other counties like Albany.
And
It's interesting.
unlike flip-flopping on issues, you're just flip-flopping politically in terms of the elected officials, not on issues.
Right. Oddly enough, though, the city has a higher Democratic enrollment.
Yes.
So, for all Republican representation to be in the city at one time is a little unusual.
Well, but you had a Republican mayor,
We did, Tutungin.
Harry Tutungin, and then now you have a Democratic mayor.
Right, and a Democratic council as well.
Right, and a Republican police chief.
So it's a good mixture. It's a balance of power. That's it. But really, Troy, and I was actually the rabbi for the high holidays in Beth Tefillah, which is 82 River Street. So a little bit, I have a little bit of my heart in Troy. I know the city.
Have you been to that synagogue?
I live between the 2 synagogues. I live on 2nd Street, right between the 1st Street Synagogue and the 3rd Street Synagogue.
They're in
So,
between.
but have you been inside?
I have not been
That's
inside,
the feel.
no.
I should take you inside. And
I'd
you should
like
look
that.
at it
Yeah.
because it's really a throwback. Berith Shalom, which is the 3rd Street Synagogue, is a Reform synagogue and relatively new compared to Beth Tefillah.
But isn't the 3rd Street Synagogue one of the oldest still operating synagogues?
One of say that, but the Reform. It
Yes.
really is. It's one of the oldest.
Right.
You
I
are
had
right
heard
about
before.
that.
Yeah.
So there used to be, maybe it's surely before my time, but a very strong Jewish community
In Troy.
in Troy, and it's been.
My home was built by Jews. Goldstein was the name.
Really?
And I'm the 3rd owner of the building. They built it in 1862.
Really?
So,
Now, I was told, now it's around Civil War time, but I have to tell you that.
You're not that old.
Well, no, but Uncle Sam came from Troy and the meat packing and the Civil War, and, it was all part of that era, right? When Troy was really involved with, right, Uncle Sam was Civil War, right?
1812. I believe that
He was 1812?
Well, I believe
Okay.
it came out of that, and it was because it was stamped on the kegs.
U.S.
U.S.
And he was
and
Sam
then it was
Wilson.
Wilson's meat packing.
And it was
so they said Uncle Sam
for
Wilson.
U.S., right, and that's how they came up with Uncle Sam.
Right.
But you had I understand in '05, it was a real struggle that you didn't really want to run for office, that you really liked being this grassroots community leader. Not so much an elected official, but you really wanted to be, because you had the Prospect Park, you had other clean alleys and other things that you wanted to do as an average citizen, putting in your own time and money to help Troy.
Who have you been speaking with? That's right.
He's a good reporter, don't you understand?
This was, I have 8 siblings, and
Yes.
we're all kind of engaging and very involved in what's going on in communities. And I have different members of my family that are public servants in different capacities, as my parents were. But, so we discuss, politics or community quite often. And I was always on the side of the argument that you can get more accomplished by being the voice, by being the community activist, by investing yourself in your community, starting grassroots kind of organizations and things like that, similar to Prospect Park, which was a conservancy that we started in Troy, the Clean Alleys program that we did in the 70s. But and then I have this brother that said, no, you can be more effective from, in a political seat because people listen to you more and whatnot. So, and this was a debate that went on for quite a while. And then I was approached once again. I had been approached several times over the years to run for office. And I don't know what it was. It was just a time in my life. I said, well, I won't know the answer to how effective you can be on either side unless I, experience it. So I decided to run. So I ran for office, and it was a bit of an uphill battle against 6 incumbents. And then, I won by 13 votes.
Oh, really?
So citywide, it was a very small margin, actually. And there was lots of, inquiries to the machines and all kinds of things after the election because it was so close. So, but now for the next question you may ask me, is it better from the inside or from the outside? And I see the benefits to both. Certainly, I have learned more diplomacy from the inside than I would have from the outside. Maybe it's because I'm exposed to more of the foundations or the workings of government, which I would have never been exposed to not having run for office and being elected. So.
I have a sign on my desk that says diplomacy is the art of telling someone to go to heck and making them enjoy the trip.
Maybe I'll be elected official.
So,
we're on the Jewish View, and I talked about Jewish synagogues in Troy.
That's
but
why I
say a
said the
little
word
bit.
heck.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you for that, Mark. In any case, a little bit of a Jewish background. I know you're not Jewish, not saying that, but you had a little bit of house was Jewish over here, so now you had any background with Jewish people?
I did. In college, I had a great opportunity of working in New York during the summers and vacations. And my sister was an administrator for a nursing home, which was a Orthodox Jewish home, and it was on Bushwick Avenue in Brooklyn at the time. Not a great district, but the home of most of these residents had been somewhere in Brooklyn at the time. So this was a home and hospital, and at the time it was rather avant-garde. They had what they called day rooms, which were a real focus on activities. The engaging of seniors in activities for stimulation. And it was also broken down into many different levels for, those that were very confused, moderate, and to those who weren't. And they had it for, there was what assisted living. They didn't call it assisted living at the time, but there were apartments for assisted living. Then there was also a hospital on the premises as well.
And it really is on the cutting edge.
It was at the time, it was very cutting edge. But for me, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I was suddenly kind of, swimming in this Jewish culture.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't, all meals were provided because it was a kosher home.
Right.
So, but the best part for me were many of these people, these were European Jews. And so they spoke 5, 6 languages, you know, because they had traveled their whole life and, you know, finally landing in the United States. And, you know, I would tell them that I was a Christian, and they wouldn't believe it. And it was always, you know, du bist a jüdische Jüngel. And
You know better Jewish than other, than 90% of Jewish people are.
so they, and, you know, their main language, or you know, the language that they spoke was universal at the home, was Yiddish.
Right.
You know, so in the foreword was there every day in the newspaper. So, but it was really a great experience for me to learn the culture. I mean, I come from a strict, you know, Catholic background. I went to Catholic schools and, you know, grew up in Catholic parishes and whatnot. And culturally, I learned about the food and the wonderful stories about these people's lives and the trials and tribulations they went through.
The struggles,
Some
challenges,
yeah, some had been, you know, survivors.
Right,
And,
the Holocaust, yeah. You talk about schools and stuff. Your father was the head of the school system?
My father was a 2-term president of the Troy
School Board? Okay.
Interestingly enough, if I can elaborate a little on
Absolutely.
that, he was
What was his name?
Fred Grimm.
Grimm, okay.
And he ran for the school board when he had 9 children that were all in Catholic school, which was kind of unheard of at the time, but it was very interesting. I mean, you know, to his credit, you know, I think at the time Troy might have been 40 to 60%, and 60% enrollment in Catholic schools, 40% in
Really,
public
that high?
schools.
That's very high.
And the Catholic schools weren't getting any benefit. It was a tuition-driven kind of situation. We didn't get books or transportation. And my father got on the school board with this kind of private institution behind him. And he won by 7 votes his first term, so it was a narrow margin, but he got in and fought for state changes into transportation. So, you know, whether you went to a Catholic school or public school, you could get transportation.
You know, this is
And
a
books.
very
Wait, there's an interesting story
Are you
here
more?
that he's coming, yeah.
I thought you were done. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. And then books. I mean,
Right, but you're talking about the transportation part.
well, the transportation. I think you might be referring
Yes.
to yet another story.
Yes,
Really?
yes.
I don't know that.
Well,
Yes, this is coming up.
When I entered high school, my family, we have a summer place out in the Grafton Mountains, and we winterized that and moved out there when I entered high school. And my 4 brothers and I were still in either grade school or high school. And we wanted to go to the Catholic school, which was 10.3 miles in Hoosick Falls.
Yeah.
But the school district, Berlin, which we lived in at the time, had a policy they would only transport up to 10 miles. But
Right.
yet they would transport us, I think it was, 20 miles to the public school in Berlin. And so
So you were 0.3, 3/10 of a mile too
Right,
far.
right.
And that was so close, that bothered your father. And he fought it for so many years that you were even, all your brothers had graduated, and then finally they said 15 mile would be the radius.
they changed it, right. They changed it. I think my youngest brother was there.
Well, anyway, the
at
idea is
time.
there.
Yes.
And
Well, we turned into poster children for this cause, too. I mean, this was back when people hitchhiked.
That's right.
And we would hitchhike every day home from school. And our
Along-
picture was on in the newspapers. And so people would pick us up and give us rides, knowing that we were the poor kids that couldn't get a school bus.
Mark, this is a very interesting idea because it really has Jewish connotations. In Brooklyn, they always talk about, and of course, Orthodox Jews, just like yourself, Catholics go to parochial schools, Orthodox Jews go to their yeshivas and their schools. And I know there are issues that then the Orthodox Jews try to get on school boards, and people say, well, that's, you're not participating in public schools. Why should you go into? So it's a real major issue. But you're really saying a good point that you can change because there's many things that now there are school books that are paid from the government and the busing. So there are and lunch programs.
You're investing the same amount of taxes as someone that
Yeah.
doesn't have their children in private
Excellent.
schools.
Yeah, that's the argument. You're asking
Right.
for money, but then say, well, don't get a vote. You can't have a say-so how it's allotted. So
Right.
it's interesting because that's a real cutting-edge issue in
At the time
Brooklyn.
it was, and it was very clever. And I remember hearing stories that my father even went to the bishop over some things and said to, we should perhaps tell them to close the Catholic schools. He said, you tell them you're closing the Catholic schools because they won't give you aid. They'll be coming to you to rent your properties and pay your faculty, to teach the overflow of all these students that they would have into their system. I think that was a little tongue-in-cheek, and I'm not so sure that was a story that went anywhere. But.
I looked at your voting record, and on your website, you really are waving the banner about that you voted no on all county tax hikes. You strengthened environmental protections. You supported dedicated fund to boost tourism. And you voted to improve veterans' benefits. That sounds like a Republican playbook. Republicans vote no on tax hikes. Republicans strengthen environmental, especially George Pataki was very big on the environmental stuff. Teddy Roosevelt was big on the environmental stuff. So you supported dedicated fund to boost tourism, and you voted to improve veterans' benefits. The Republicans are all, the pro-gun, pro-veterans, and I'm just looking at this and I'm saying, well, minority leader, I didn't know the Democrats controlled the.
Well, local politics are a little different than what they are. And, especially when there is a Republican majority that is in charge, essentially, or controlling the budget, if taxes have to go up. It puts me in a position to challenge what the revenue streams are and what our sources are in the budget and not agreeing with those. And this is all threaded together in the sense that, the supporting tourism, that is the number one, revenue potential for
In Troy.
For Rensselaer County. I think it's a very,
Well, if you get the casino, you'll certainly be a big tourism boost.
One would hope, but you don't know for sure. That's a gamble and no play on
tell
words
us
here.
about the tourism, Rensselaer County. Just generally, I'm saying I don't, I've
Well,
been in Troy, but.
Well, Rabbi, many of the counties have a portion of their budget is dedicated to, boosting tourism.
Right.
Okay, so they take a certain amount of money and they use it for marketing tourism in their county. We don't do that in Rensselaer County. And what it is, they take it from the bed tax. So there's a certain portion of the bed tax in Albany County that's dedicated to the promotion of tourism in Albany County. So there's always a budget to work in with, and it adds a certain consistency, for planning what to do in marketing and whatnot. Troy doesn't have that. It's kind of whimsical about, or Rensselaer County doesn't have that, about how it promotes tourism. We do have a tourism council. There are people that gather together from the, different people that are invested in tourism throughout the county, different venues and historical spaces, the Gateway or Gould's Orchard or different places like this that come together.
I know Fort Craylow, Uncle Sam, and Emma Willard. What other tourism things are there? That people historically that people would flock to Rensselaer County for. I've been looking, and I haven't found it.
There are many things. We have all kinds of. You can narrow down tourism to Christmas tree cutting down, or to pumpkin patches, or to apple picking.
Well, Hanukkah menorah lightings. No,
Yes, but all of these things are what people come to counties to do, and how you market those, I think, is critical to how you get the people to.
I always felt that, I've been in Troy, like I say, and the waterfront is very underutilized. It's a beautiful river, and things could be made there. I'm not an architect, to think of things, but just waterfront, you see in New York City, you go down to New York City, the same Hudson River, and condos are there, and there's so many things, and boat rides.
Chelsea Piers.
Well, I think I don't know this for sure, but I think it's, from Terrytown up to Troy, we are the only real pedestrian conducive waterfront that is, in that span. And I think it's always a focus in people that are, developing in Troy. But there is a history of Troy. I remember growing up in Troy where you stayed away from the river because it's where all the sludge and the sewer emptied into. I remember the factories down on River Street near where I lived growing up, this stuff just poured
Right.
into the river. But it's changed. And, this evolution, and I think we're getting closer to it. Troy just launched a new Realize Troy, which is this whole putting together a master plan for development. And they've hired, through some different fundings and I think some grant matchings, this series of companies to come in. And they had a kickoff last week on Rensselaer College. And then I was fortunate enough to be brought in as on a recreation side because of my involvement with Prospect Park, to sit and talk to these people as they put together. It's very hard to have progress, I think, if you don't have a plan. I mean, if you don't
You're
have
right,
a
you're right.
roadmap to go,
Right.
you are vulnerable to everyone and everything that happens. I think politicians need a roadmap. I think they need something to be responsible to. If they have a plan, and the plan, it's like anything that has that kind of goal thermometer. If we don't reach this in so many years,
Yeah.
then you're not doing your job. I have reason not to vote for you.
Okay.
Or if you're doing it and we're moving ahead in this plan, citizens have a reason to keep these people in office and to reelect them.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You're the director of events at RPI?
I'm currently director of university events
Right.
at Rensselaer, yes.
At RPI.
I'm in 2 years in the position.
Okay. Now RPI is this magnet in Troy. It stands out like nanotech stands out in Albany. I mean, how can you use RPI, and would it be a conflict of interest for you? But how can you use RPI to help with tourism or help boost the economy, or tie the RPI in with Rensselaer County? I mean, more so than it really is. I mean, it seems like this university on the hill, and it's up there somewhere.
Well, I'm fairly new at RPI, but I'd like to go into the history of RPI a little bit more. I mean, over the years, I even grew up with RPI. It was almost like the ivory tower on the hill, and the people that came there came for 4 years and then they left. Somehow, it seems to me in the 70s, there was this whole kind of turn where a lot of graduates from RPI became interested in the downtown, the architecture, the historical significance of Troy, and invested in a lot of the properties. People in my neighborhood were RPI graduates, and it started kind of a whole new cycle. Now, mind you, when I moved into my neighborhood, which I live in a brownstone in downtown Troy, some properties were selling for anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000, and they were fixer-uppers, but people were going in and doing this. So there was that kind of movement that's started happening, and then 15 years ago when Dr. Jackson took over as president, I think in her plan was to become more involved in the community.
Integrated with
They
the
called it
community.
communiversity.
Okay.
And I think, since then, Troy and Rensselaer have become great partners in doing things. And it's quite obvious they have like this, when the freshmen first come back, they have this whole kind of campus to downtown Troy thing. And we have an approach, which is this big staircase that goes down from the university into the city, and the mayor greets the students, and Dr. Jackson greets them at the top of the stairs, and then there's this whole kind of festival that happens. I know that most of the businesses, it's a focus for them to offer discounts to students to come downtown, and the tourism aspect of that is, with these students coming into town, you also have parents that come to visit.
Sure.
Right,
When
right.
they come to visit, they spend
Spend
money
money.
in the restaurants, they stay in hotels.
Right.
They also, take tours from the Historical Society. They maybe take a riverboat cruise. They, that's just another one of those potentials.
Okay. Now, let me just ask you in the few minutes we have left here, and about this Jewish business that is in Troy. It's a Jewish-owned business, so that's why I'm concerned about it. Kokopelli's. It's a bar. It's on 4th Street. And unfortunately, you know, it had some incident in January.
It did.
But it seems like every time some other incident happens that has nothing to do with Kokopelli's, the media refers to it and says, oh, and these things happened ever since the Kokopelli's thing in January. So they keep getting tagged with it. Now, if something doesn't happen, whether it's the county legislature or it's the representatives or it's the city council or the mayor or the police chief or whatever, to say that this place should not be demonized, you're going to have another blight on 4th Street because the place is going to close. Now, I'm sure you don't, I mean, for an economic development stance, I would hope that you would be supportive or somehow be able to find a solution in terms of a marketing aspect or something to try to help this business. Because right now you go in there, there's no one there. Mm-hmm. So there's no crowd. There's not a bad crowd, there's not a good crowd. There's no crowd. The owner has more employees than customers. He pays out on a weekend $700, brings in $200. I mean, I need you to talk about this from an economic development standpoint. And how can you help? How can you, you know, can they, what can you do?
First of all, Mark, I don't know how this became the launching pad for, you know, a series of events, negative events that have been happening in Troy. But I don't disagree with you. I think that's true. I also don't understand how this became so involved. I mean, it seemed like, I mean, the evening, we all know what happened that evening.
Right.
There were some problems. The police were called in. What really happened in there is not been determined quite yet.
But there are these nuisance points that bars are given when they call the police, and then they even, I mean, this bar owner did not invite these people in to say, okay, you can have a free-for-all and you can fight. I mean, he doesn't want that. And, you know, even when UAlbany had a homecoming party at a bar down the block, and they maxed out 400 University of Albany students came down the block to Kokopelli's. He let in 80 of them, and there was still 320 students out in the street, and it just happened to be in front of the bar, but, you know, they were 320 rowdy, you know, young kids. But that had nothing to do with Kokopelli's, and they still get tagged with it from a marketing perspective. So I think that there needs to be someone from people in government to tell the residents and the citizens, this is not a bad place, you know, don't you know, patronize it and help it, you know. That's my view. I mean, I'm just asking, you know,
right.
If you could support,
you know, and this is, I mean, they got a bad rap.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a problem there. You know, and what that problem is, I think it's still under investigation. I don't think that we've ever heard any determination on what has happened there. You know, it's a channel of where the streets are filled with kids at late night on weekends. And, you know, I have friends that don't live in Troy, and they say, you know, my 20-something kids left going to Troy. And they go down to the pizza shop, which is across the street, and, you know, they're down in that neighborhood, and, you know, they're worried that they're not okay, you know. And I think the more the merrier. I think the safer in numbers you are anywhere. And so I don't think the area has a bad rap. I don't know if it
well, the area does have a bad rap if the parents are saying, I'm worried about my kids being there.
I know, but that's just perception.
That's right.
I mean, I don't think it is. There's anything to really prove that, and I think that the patrons are still going to that area now. Why they're not going to Kokopelli?
Because they're scared. Because the perception, and they say we're scared. We don't want to go, so they go to the bar on Second, or I forgot the name. What the name? Ruck's or. Ruck.
The Ruck.
The Ruck.
Right.
And there's another one that's down there also.
Right.
And there's one around the corner, and they're going everywhere else, but they're not going here because the perception, until someone breaks that perception, is that it's just a bad spot.
I know that city council members, and this was a real city issue, it was the police issue and whatnot, and I know that city council members got involved in this. You know, I think it's also fair for us to say that bars are cyclical. I mean, things happen, you know, the new brew pub just opened around the corner from them in the old Trojan
Right.
Hardware. The Ruck just did its front over and has a new chef,
Right.
and the food has been just reviewed with high standards from the Times Union.
Steve Barnes.
So I think it moves around too.
Wow.
This did not help them.
Right.
You know,
So, okay, so we're out of time, but if there's anything that you can do, that you can think of from an economic development standpoint, so there's not another blight on 4th Street, I'd appreciate it, and maybe we could talk later.
I think
but-
we should do anything to encourage
Okay.
businesses to say that are there.
All right, thank you very much. Listen, you're doing a great job in Troy, and keep on rolling, and much success to all your heart's endeavors, and going higher and higher, and do it all with good health.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.